She'd always known how to own a room, but this time was different. It happened so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. One moment she was answering a friend's harmless question, the next her voice shifted, brighter, sharper, almost staged. I'd heard her laugh thousands of times, but this laugh was foreign. It carried a cruelty tucked beneath its rhythm, like a private joke I wasn't meant to catch. She was laughing too hard at nothing. Her eyes flicked toward me, but not with affection, with dismissal, as though I were background scenery she'd outgrown. That sudden change rattled me. I'd known her long enough to read her moods, the soft sighs when she was tired, the clipped sentences when she was irritated. This wasn't that. This was transformation, a deliberate shift into someone I didn't recognize. And in that moment, sitting across from her, I felt the first real crack in my certainty. She kept talking, her words laced with a brightness that felt rehearsed. To everyone else it looked like charm, but I heard the edge. It wasn't moodiness. It wasn't stress. It was a performance, and the cruelest part was how easily the audience accepted it. I slid my hand into my pocket and felt the small weight of the silver cufflink pressing against my palm. I'd carried it absent-mindedly for weeks, a leftover from a jacket I rarely wore anymore. But in that moment, it became more than an accessory. It became an anchor, something tactile to remind me I wasn't imagining what I saw. The cufflink was smooth, polished, unchanging, while everything else felt like it was shifting under my feet. She went on, weaving herself deeper into this new persona, and I sat in silence. The cufflink turned in my hand as if each rotation was a question. Who is she right now? When did she decide to become this version? People always talk about red flags as if they come in bright signals you can't miss. In my experience, they arrive quietly. They slip in through tone, timing, a look that lasts too long or ends too soon. That night, her smile cut sharper, her voice carried higher, and suddenly I was staring at someone who'd been beside me for years but was now out of reach. The room didn't notice. Why would they? To them, she was lively, radiant, the center of gravity. But to me, the performance revealed itself in every exaggerated laugh, every sideways glance. And the cruelest part wasn't her change. It was how quickly I realized she didn't care if I noticed. I pressed the cufflink tighter into my palm until the edges bit my skin, grounding me. It wasn't anger yet, not even pain, just the cold awareness that something had shifted permanently, and that the woman smiling across the table had just shown me a version of herself she never meant for me to see. I didn't speak. I didn't interrupt. I just sat there, turning the cufflink, and wondered how long this transformation had been rehearsing in the shadows before it finally stepped into the light. And in that silence, I felt the story begin. It didn't take long for the shift to show up at home. At first, it was small things, the kind of changes you could almost laugh off. Her phone, once left on the counter without thought, started following her everywhere. Kitchen, bathroom, even the laundry room. I'd hear the faint buzz of a notification, and before I could glance up, she was already there, scooping it into her hand like a reflex. She never looked at me when she typed, only at the screen. Her eyes narrowed as though the glow held more weight than I did. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing. Everyone guards their phone. Everyone has private moments. But it wasn't just the phone. Doors began closing where they used to stay open. She'd lock the bathroom while showering, a habit she never had before. The water would run for 15 minutes, but I'd hear the pause, the kind of stillness when someone is standing motionless, listening. And then, almost theatrically, the water would start again. That's when suspicion stopped being a passing thought and started settling in my chest. At night, when she believed I was asleep, she'd turn away from me and light up the room with the pale glow of her screen. I'd watch the way her thumbs moved quickly, like she already knew what she wanted to say. Sometimes she'd smile faintly at the replies. Not a broad smile, not laughter, just that quiet, private curve of lips reserved for someone who wasn't me. I didn't ask. Not yet. Questions felt dangerous. Her secrecy wasn't defensive, it was confident. She wasn't hiding out of fear of being caught. She was hiding because she didn't think I would ever look. The cufflink sat on the dresser now. I'd left it there absent-mindedly after carrying it in my pocket for weeks. At night, I'd catch the reflection of her phone's glow bouncing off its polished surface. A flash of silver against the dark, like the cufflink itself was awake, watching the same things I was. One evening, I came into the kitchen just as she was sliding her phone face down across the counter. Too quick, too rehearsed. Who was that? I asked lightly, opening the fridge. She didn't look up from rinsing her glass. Work thing. The words were casual, but her shoulders tightened just enough for me to notice. She dried the glass slowly, methodically, like she needed to fill the silence with movement. That was the moment I knew. It wasn't just a phase. It wasn't stress or distraction or one bad day. It was secrecy, deliberate and growing. Every lock on the door, every turn screen, every late-night errand, they were stitches in a pattern. A story being written right in front of me, but not for me. And in that realization, I felt something colder than anger. I felt inevitability. Because secrecy doesn't stay quiet forever. It leaks. It spreads. It always leaves a trail. I just didn't know yet how loud that trail would become. The hint didn't arrive as fireworks. It slid in on a Tuesday. I stopped by a rooftop get-together after work, string lights. She was running late, which had become her new resting state. I stood near the rail, cooling my palm on a cup of soda, rolling a silver cufflink between my fingers inside my pocket. It clicked against my ring with each turn, a quiet metronome for thoughts I wasn't ready to say out loud. Noah, an acquaintance from a volunteer board, drifted over with a half-smile. He lifted his glass. "Hey, tell her good luck tomorrow. Those late workshops sound brutal." I kept my face still. "Workshops? Yeah," he said, checking his phone. "She mentioned a few wellness nights at the studio across town. I told her I used to do those. They run until, what, midnight?" He shrugged. "Anyway, she said you were cool about it." The cufflink paused in my palm. I had no idea what he was talking about. I knew about a studio, barely. But midnight? I pictured the click of the bathroom door, water rushing and stopping like the faucet needed to be convinced. "Right," I said. "Those." Noah smiled, relieved, and stirred his ice. "If my partner said late wellness, I'd be asleep by 9. He chuckled, then added, "She said you don't mind because you're up working on that portfolio site." That was new. I hadn't touched the site in months. It would be easy to file this as a harmless mix-up. She tries a class, forgets to mention it. Noah misremembers. The mind reaches for comfort first. My phone buzzed, an automated email that our shared calendar had a new private event blocked out for. Studio, recovery. She never used the private flag before. The notification flashed on the cufflink as I turned it, a tiny rectangle of light living in the metal. I left early. In the elevator down, a woman from her gym, the kind I only recognized from a holiday party, stepped in, scrolling. She glanced up, placed me, offered a nod. "Tell her I found that water bottle she forgot. The one with the taped initials." She smiled. "I left it at the front desk." I nodded. "I'll pass it along." "What were the initials?" I asked too quickly. Her brows lifted. "Relax, detective." "Looked like MR. Maybe NR." The tape was scuffed. Doors opened. She walked out. I stood alone for a beat. MR didn't match any name I knew in her orbit. Maybe I misheard. Maybe the tape was old, a loner, the kind studios pass around like umbrellas. Explanations multiply easily if you feed them. At home, the apartment looked staged. Bro blanket squared, candle snuffed. She texted that she'd lost track of time, then added an emoji I'd never seen her use. I set the cufflink on the dresser beside my keys and watched the next text glance off the metal and skate along the wall. I told myself there was nothing to confront. Not yet. A friend's casual mention. A mismatched detail. A bottle with initials I might have misheard. All of it could still be innocent if I held it at arm's length and squinted. But innocence shouldn't need this much squinting. I lay awake listening to the taps of her thumbs in the dark. When she finally turned over, I felt the mattress lift a fraction, as if the bed itself had learned to keep space between us. The cufflink, cool again against my palm, clicked once as I closed my fist. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'll stop pretending I don't hear the water pause in the shower, or the silence that follows. The message arrived while I was rinsing a plate, a known number on the lock screen. "Hey, you don't know me." She said you never notice. "Thought you should know." I set the plate down too carefully. Across the room, the silver cufflink on the counter caught the phone's glow, and drew a line of light on the wall. I typed, erased, tried again. "Who is this?" A pause. Then, another beat. From the studio. The initials clicked, MR, the taped letters on that bottle. The private calendar blocks. The bathroom water that stopped, listened, started again. "What do you want?" I asked. "Nothing. I'm out." He added a sentence, careful. "She said you're too trusting into routine." It didn't sit right. I didn't ask for proof. He sent it anyway. First a screenshot, a map pinned from a parking garage near the studio, time-stamped on nights I'd been home answering her texts about running over time. Then a second, the lower corner of her jacket in a mirror, hardware catching fluorescent light. The angle wasn't tender. It was administrative. I replied with one word. Received. He wrote back. Sorry. And the thread went silent. I stood in the kitchen until the water cooled. When I finally moved, it was to pocket the cufflink like a small anchor against the part of me that still loved softer explanations. She came in late, hair damp, cheeks bright with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed on the drive home. He's down softly, coat folded in thirds. Long class? She said, stretching. Yeah? I asked, drying my hands on a towel I didn't remember hanging. She reached for a glass and paused, thumb hovering over her screen. A notification slid up, then disappeared under her palm. You eat? She asked, eyes lowered. Yeah. The word felt like a borrowed line. We moved around each other with the choreography of strangers. Bone face down, then up, then down again. The cufflink threw a crescent of light that vibrated with each muted haptic. Later, while the shower ran, on, off, on again, I opened my laptop. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for patterns. In our shared cloud I saw a folder I didn't recognize, a gray lock icon beside notes titled Recovery. The title matched her calendar euphemism. The folder asked for a code I didn't have. I scrolled farther. In Archives, a shared album flickered into view for a heartbeat, cover tile, a blurred staircase, a parking deck stripe, then vanished as permissions shifted mid-search. A month ago I would have blamed my eyes, my mouse, my memory. Tonight, I blamed the pattern. Secrets aren't loud, they're consistent. They show up in the same places at the same times and trust you not to trace them. She slid into bed and draped her arm across me like someone setting a coat on a chair. Big day tomorrow, she murmured, already half asleep. Sure, I said, staring at the ceiling. I pinned M's thread at the top so I wouldn't pretend it hadn't happened. The words were ordinary, you never notice. But ordinary is where patterns hide best. I didn't feel rage. I felt relief, the kind that arrives when an argument with yourself finally runs out of counterpoints. I turned the cufflink between finger and thumb, the metal warming to my skin. Acceptance doesn't announce itself. It just sits beside you, quiet as furniture, and refuses to move. By the time I closed my eyes, it was already in the room with me. The truth spread quietly, but I was the last to hear it. It started with a family dinner. My brother leaned back after the plates were cleared, swirling his drink, watching me in a way that made me uneasy. You holding up? He asked. His tone was too careful, like someone checking on a wound he already knew existed. I raised a brow. Why wouldn't I be? He hesitated, then gave the kind of half-shrug men give when they don't want to answer fully. Just noticed she's been different. Thought maybe you had too. I laughed once, short, to close the subject, but the cufflink in my pocket dug against my thigh like a reminder not to dismiss it. The next week, my cousin called about something trivial, tickets, schedules, and then, out of nowhere, she sighed into the phone. I should have said something earlier, but she told me you'd been fragile. That I shouldn't pile things on you. The words landed heavy, because I hadn't told anyone I was fragile. That wasn't her assessment of me. That was her excuse to keep them silent. I thanked my cousin, kept my voice flat, and hung up. The silence around me felt rehearsed now, as if everyone had been handed a script except me. I replayed recent moments with friends, the sidelong glances when she spoke, the quick subject changes, the way people avoided meeting my eyes. They hadn't just suspected. They had known. And knowing, they had chosen to protect her narrative instead of my reality. That was when the digital breach stopped feeling like a private discovery. I wasn't uncovering something hidden. I was stepping into a theater where the play had been running for months, maybe longer, and I was just the audience member who hadn't bought a ticket. One evening, scrolling through archived emails, I found a forwarded thread between her and a friend, buried in the wrong folder, overlooked by whatever system she thought hid it. The words weren't explicit. They didn't have to be. He doesn't notice. Just smile. He'll believe anything. I sat in the dark, the cufflink on the desk beside me, glowing faintly from the screen's light. It wasn't proof I needed anymore. I had proof. What I lacked was voice. Because the betrayal wasn't just hers. It was shared by the people who chose silence. Family who nodded politely, friends who bit their tongues, acquaintances who smiled while holding pieces of the puzzle. And as that realization settled in, the cufflink felt heavier than it ever had. Not because it was metal, but because it was the only solid thing I could still trust to stay what it was. I turned it slowly between my fingers, the metal warming to my skin. Each rotation echoed a single thought. They knew. And I was the last to find out. That knowledge didn't spark fury. It didn't break me open. It hollowed me out instead, quietly, methodically, leaving a space where anger should have been. And I realized the stakes weren't just about her choices anymore. They were about the silence of everyone who'd watched me play the part of the blind man in a story I never agreed to join. The stage was crowded. I just hadn't noticed I was standing alone at its center. It arrived as theater dressed like tenderness. We were out with two couples she adored. She kept glancing at her phone between laughs, then set its screen up beside her water. Midway through a story she froze, hand to her stomach, face angled so everyone could see the pallor she chose. "I might need to step out," she murmured, already pushing her chair. I felt the silver cufflink in my pocket notch against bone. Outside, she leaned against brick and winced in increments. "Doctor called," she said, eyes glossy. "We should talk at home." Her thumb cleared a notification I wasn't meant to see. Not a clinic, just a first name with a lightning bolt emoji. "I'm fine," she added too quickly. "It's probably nothing. Just a scare." The word landed like a cue. When I didn't echo it back, she half smiled as if I'd missed my mark. On the drive she reclined and closed her eyes. Her phone lay on her lap, face down but awake, small tremors, stillness, then another tremor. At home she watered a plant she usually forgets exists. "I'll call again in the morning," she said. "I don't want to worry you until there's certainty." Certainty is a draft people memorize. While the shower ran, on, pause, on again, I opened my laptop to the cloud she thought I didn't understand. The locked folder still wanted a code, but a cached preview lingered in recents, a note titled, "Pilot," half a page, bullet points like stage directions. Mention phone call, urgent but inconclusive, hand to stomach, sit if possible. If he doesn't lead, emphasize scare. If he offers to come, say they're just running labs, no visitors. Follow up with maybe false alarm. A second file sat beside it, a clipped screenshot from a thread labeled, "Strategy." Her name dotted through it with checkmarks and trophies. A contact saved as M. wrote, "Trial run went smooth. He's steady." Her reply, "He doesn't push," plus the crying laughing face. I copied both, not to convince myself, but to keep clarity from being revised later. She came out in a robe and leaned on the doorframe. "Sorry about dinner," she said, browning it with sincerity. "I didn't want to make a scene." "You didn't," I said. "You made a rehearsal." A blink, then recalculation. "What? If there's an appointment, I'll drive." "They don't allow visitors," she answered too fast. "Just labs." "Right," I said, and closed the laptop. She crossed the room and placed her palm on my chest. "I'm scared," she whispered, voice softened at the edges. "Fear is a convincing costume. It also stains." She slept in a curl at the mattress edge. I airdropped the files to a time-stamped folder and backed them up. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking thermostat and the refrigerator's hum. Near midnight, an unknown number, same one from the studio, lit my screen. "You okay?" it read. I pinned that thread beneath the one labeled strategy and answered, "Understood." Around 2, she reached for my hand and placed it on her stomach like signing with skin. I let it rest long enough to register, then slipped free and set the cufflink on the nightstand where the phone's glow could find it. Morning would bring gentle updates. Good news, maybe nothing. Then a promise to keep me posted. I would nod. I would offer the drive again and watch a policy appear. Acceptance isn't surrender. It's the quiet click when denial runs out of hinges. By dawn, mine had. I didn't rage. I didn't announce. I set the stage without her script. On a Thursday evening, I printed the files, her pilot, rehearsal notes, the clipped screenshot from the thread called Strategy, the messages marked with emojis that mocked the very fear she tried to drape across me. I stacked them neatly on the counter, beside the silver cufflink. Not hidden, not dramatic, just placed where they couldn't be ignored. She came in humming, keys jingling too brightly, like she was trying to score her own entrance. Bag on the hook, shoes by the door, phone face down on the counter. Her eyes found the papers before they found me. Her hand hovered above them, but she didn't touch. "What's this?" she asked, tone too calm. "Your lines," I said. My voice stayed level. "The ones you've been practicing." She laughed once, brittle, and reached for the stack. I slid it closer to me. "Leave them," I said. Not sharp, just final. "You're misinterpreting," she began, palms lifting in a gesture rehearsed as well. "Those aren't real. They're drafts for a workshop, role-playing scenarios." "For work, role-playing," I echoed. I tapped the page where her own words sat in bullet points. Mentioned phone call, hand to stomach, emphasized scare. Her throat moved. She started again. "It was for..." "Don't," I said. My tone didn't rise. It flattened, and the room shifted with it. For the first time in months, her composure cracked. Fingers drummed against her thigh, restless. "You've been snooping. You've been staging." Her mouth opened, closed. She reached for her phone, but I slid it across the counter toward her before she could. "Check it," I said. "You'll find your own words there. You won't find me explaining them for you." She unlocked, scrolled, eyes darting as if she might find a message that rewrote the truth. None came. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I understand perfectly," I said. I placed the cufflink on the top sheet, the metal's weight pressing her handwriting flat. "You built a script. I stepped off stage." She tried again, faster now, words spilling, angles shifting. "I was testing you, seeing if you'd notice. I was scared you'd stop paying attention." But every explanation collapsed before it reached me. Each phrase frayed in her hands because I didn't argue. I didn't meet her halfway. I only let silence expand around her, an echo chamber she couldn't direct. She moved from defensive to pleading in minutes, her voice rising then breaking. The calm I held became her undoing. I didn't need to prove anything. She was proving it herself, unraveling line by line. Finally, she slammed a hand on the counter. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," I said, and the word landed harder than anger ever could. Because in that moment, she realized the stage she'd built was gone. The spotlight, the script, the audience she curated, all dissolved. She was alone in a silence she couldn't fill. And for the first time, she wasn't the one in control. The cufflink gleamed between us, final and still. She reached for it, maybe to claim something familiar. I slid it back into my pocket. "Not this," I said softly. "This stays with me." Her breath shook. The calm stayed. And in that reversal, she lost the only role she knew how to play. It didn't take long. Reputations don't collapse in fire, they dissolve in silence. By the weekend, the first whispers had already moved ahead of her. The same friends who once praised her sharpness stopped replying. Group chats where she thrived went quiet the moment her name appeared. Her curated circle, the one she counted on to laugh at her lines, thinned to nothing. I didn't have to tell them. Screenshots travel faster than explanations. A single image, her notes titled Pilot, her staged performance bullet-pointed, passed quietly from one phone to another. No commentary needed. Just proof of how much of her life had been theater. At a family gathering, my cousin avoided her eyes, speaking only to me. My brother didn't ask if I was holding up anymore. He asked if I was free to help him move a couch next weekend. The shift was subtle but absolute. The script had flipped. She wasn't the one being protected now. She was the one being avoided. She tried to maintain control. I watched her post carefully staged photos, dinners with empty chairs cropped out, captions full of light she no longer carried. The likes slowed. The comments stopped. Even her allies stepped back, unwilling to be tethered to someone exposed as a director of lies. One night, she called 3 friends in a row from the living room. Each went to voicemail. She scrolled, then set the phone down with shaking hands. Her audience had left the building, and she hadn't noticed the door closing. I said nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't console. I let the silence stand, the same silence she'd forced on me when everyone else knew, but chose not to speak. The cufflink stayed in my pocket, smoothed against my palm. Not as a memory of her, but as proof that something solid could still exist when everything else turned into performance. By the month's end, she was a shadow moving through rooms that no longer held applause. Reputation gone. Circles scattered. Stories told without her in them. I didn't vanish in anger. I didn't disappear with ceremony. I simply stepped aside and let her live in the echoes she had built for herself. Her fall wasn't loud. It was quiet, surgical. A silence she couldn't direct, couldn't rehearse, couldn't charm. And I left her there, watching the last of her applause die mid-sentence. The cufflink still rests in my pocket. Not hers. Not ours. Mine. A reminder that I walked away intact, while she became nothing more than a story nobody wanted to hear again.